Welcome to Conversations with the USA Race Walking Foundation. All right, well, welcome everybody. This is our first real talk that we're going to hopefully do a lot of these. It's sponsored by the USA Race Walking Foundation, which is a nonprofit group that helps to promote race walking within the United States. But we do a lot of things that help people all over the world because we're writing a lot of stuff on officiating and different things like that. Today, we're going to talk about shoes. Shoes are probably the number one topic for race walkers. It's really the only equipment that we need. And put a post up about shoes and you get lots of comments. I've brought a couple of people today to really be the experts. I'm going to be more of a facilitator. I'm going to start with Coach Carmin Jackinsky, who's a level 1 Safe Sports certified coach. She's been coaching and working with race walking for 25 years. She's been a competitive walker since just after I started. I should have introduced myself. I'll do that at the end. In 1986, and she made 2 USA 50K teams. She's got a lot of very unique experience, and she's the founder of Reshod Shoes. And at the end of this talk, we're going to really focus in on Reshod and what the difference is from everything else. We also have Alex Price, who is a super smart guy, and he has 2 degrees from Dartmouth in engineering. It seems that a lot of race walkers kind of overlap with computing. Hey, Mike Mannozzi, the Italian Stallion, has joined us, and engineering, and that's really good because you bring that analytical mind to looking at shoes. And one of the reasons I asked Alex here is he claims that he uses spreadsheets more than any rational person would, and he has created the ultimate race walking shoe spreadsheet that we will share with you. Alex, if you want to pop it in chat again, just so everybody has it, and then we'll post it with the video when we're done. So we will talk later about kind of where the world is in race walking shoes. We've also brought Mike Mannozzi, who we just lost his video, but he is a national team member and he competes in Reshod Shoes. So I thought it'd be interesting to get that perspective, because as we talk about the study that I did, we'll find that more beginners gravitated to Reshod Shoes than necessarily elites, but there are still elites that use them. So with that said, I am going to flip off the screen share and just really talk about traditionally what makes a great race walking shoe. And I've walked in every shoe under the face of the earth, and I've got a collection to my side that's pretty large, but I'm going to start with this one. Hang on, somehow Carmen became, there we go. Okay, I'm going to start with this one, which is a new field shoe. It's relatively new. It's almost impossible to get, and that's the challenge and the bane of race walking. A traditional race walking shoe tends to have a low heel, which is good. If I picked a bad running shoe, for instance, and I put them side by side, you would see that the running shoe has a much higher, softer heel, and runners need that for cushioning. So we've done away with that and said, let's have a low heel. You have zeroed or a very low drop, meaning it's just as high in the back as it is in the front. And it's very flexible in the right part of the shoe, which is under the ball of the foot, because we want to get that push off. What you don't want is a shoe like this that just crushes in your hands under the arch of the foot. There's not enough stability. You typically want a hard heel counter or heel cup in the back. A lot of shoes like this one doesn't have it, so you don't get that stability. And that's really the challenge, right? So we want the perfect shoe, and we've tried to evolve into a perfect shoe over time. So I'm going to do a really quick, hey, let's look at what's in Jeff's closet. And then Carmen's going to show a few from her closet, and so is Alex. And then we'll evolve into what people are currently wearing. Alex will talk about that. I'll give you the results of my shoe survey. And then we're going to let Carmen talk about why Reshod is very different from the shoes that we're talking about. And indeed, what Alex is looking at it. He looked at the elites at the World Championships, and they're not necessarily walking with the same shoes that we would recommend to you. So this is my oldest walking shoe. I wanted to be able to walk in this in college, It is a low basic zero drop shoe with a flexible front that's hard as a brick. You can tell from the shoe wear, I basically never wore it. It killed my shins. I could not, maybe an elite walker could walk in something like this. I could not. What I ended up gravitating to for the most of my competitive career, and I didn't really talk about myself, I'm not that important, but I had a short, promising race walking career that was riddled with injuries unrelated to race walking. Car accident, 3 hernias. I actually have a 4th hernia surgery scheduled next month. I was destined to be the keyboard jockey to teach people how to race walk. But I used to wear basically ASIC shoes that were racing flats. They would wear out pretty quickly. They were flexible in the front. They had a nice sturdy heel counter. The heel in the back wasn't too big. It fit me nicely in the toe, and these were very comfortable. And then they stopped making them. Finally, a company like New Balance came along and made the New Balance Race Walker, which pretty much followed everything that we had talked about. This is probably early 90s, mid 90s. And we, as a community, loved them, but we were a small community. And New Balance said, we're not doing that anymore. So along came a company called Hersey, and they made custom race walking shoes. And they were really the first people to try to address what we were doing. They were not really made for elites. They were heavier. They did have a lighter shoe that was made for racing. Kirk Clausen, I think, wore these when he finished 3rd at the World Championships, or the lighter version of this. And they were pretty good, not quite as flexible as I wanted. He drifted away from focusing on these. These were very expensive. There was a 6-month waiting time. I did work with him on a prototype. And what I wanted was a little more stiffness through here, but not here. And Carmin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked on your site. You had in your shoe a diagram where you have the different kind of stiffnesses of the midsole and the bottom of the shoe, right? There you go. And so I think you did it right. He did not, because look what happened to the bottom of the shoe after a little.
Mine's going the other direction.
Yep.
You see how they're going forward? I did mine backwards.
So, you know, I was working with him. I'm not a shoe expert. I don't have the background, and we were playing with things that obviously didn't work.
But that's how you learn.
Absolutely. And so I will say that I ended up evolving into, I needed a decent pair to film the race walking revolution. The only thing I can find that was close were the 1400s from New Balance. They worked okay. And I'm not saying this because Carmin is my friend. My preferred shoe to train in is the Reshod. I don't walk at any level near an elite anymore. The one thing that I love about shoes like Reshod is they will be consistent and they will be there. And when you like them, you can get them for years. And I'll let her talk more about them. I did want to show 2 shoes off. One, I posted them on Facebook, and somebody was talking about them. I said, "Oh, can you guess who they are?" And somebody did. And I'm like, that's frightening. The reason I'm showing them is this is horrible and excellent all at the same time. This is Tim Seaman's shoe. This is Miranda Melville's shoe. And the wear pattern is like a footprint, right? So you see how much push off Tim gets off of his feet. Miranda does, but kind of more at the ball of the foot. They're poor elite athletes, so they wear their shoes too long. You should never wear your shoes this long. All right. All that said, Carmin, why don't you take over?
Yeah, I'll just kind of pick up where you left off. I have some Phil Dunn shoes, which has a very similar wear pattern. I should have pulled those out, but I could probably go grab them while someone else is talking, because it is kind of interesting to look at the patterns, and there isn't just one way that shoes should be made. And I think one of the problems I've seen, one of the hangups, is that we've gotten stuck in this paradigm that the shoe has to be low heel, flexible forefoot. And so people are always looking for that. And my shoes aren't made that way. And the reason why is because when I went to work for Nike in 1992, I had an opportunity to work in the women's marketing department. And I took that shoe that you have the Adidas shoe with the kangaroo upper, show that one again, that really stiff one with the blue bottom. blue outsole. Yeah, so I had that shoe and it was incredibly stiff. And since this was a race walk shoe, I just assumed that this was the norm. And so what I did was I took that shoe and figured out how to make it pivot so that it's flexible in a vertical way. And what I mean by that is that I decided that the shoe needs to have, we need to be able to push sooner in the gait. So I wanted cushioning under the ball of the foot so that when your foot comes down, you're not holding it there, but it's more efficient to be able to start pushing sooner. And then that takes pressure off your anterior tib because that's going to stretch that. And so I started playing around with a negative heel shoe. So the first shoes were a reverse heel or negative heel where the toe was higher than the heel. And so I actually made them by hand. So when my Reshod started in 08 or 08, and people would send me their shoes because I didn't have a factory to make them. And so what they did was they'd send me a full shoe that looked like whatever they had. I didn't want to have to deal with fit. And Jeff, you did this. You sent me a shoe, your running shoe, didn't work. So I would take it to a shoe repairer, an engineer, and they'd take off the midsole outsole. So they'd carve it down and then they would shave it down so it looked like this. And I would actually make by hand the midsole. So I go to a founding store, a foundry. So when I buy sheets of EVA, so it comes in sheet stock like this. And I would cut out a square. And I would shave off. This first piece is the heel. So this is a firm heel. And then I'd make the pivot piece inside. So this middle piece is softer, but I'd have to cut it. I made lines on it, cut it, grind it down. And then I would laminate the toe foam. So I'd have sheets of rebounding foam and I'd shave them, glue them together. And what ended up happening is I'd come up with this piece like this. So I had that heel piece, the middle piece, and the toe piece. And then I would take the shoe and we'd put it on top. We'd glue it on top like this. And then the cobbler would, or the engineer would cut this out. We'd have a shoe and then we needed to put an outsole on it. So this is what an outsole is. And it's just a skin that you can purchase. And then that would go, of course, on the bottom of this, and you'd have a shoe. Each pair took 5 hours to make, 5 hours. So I could maybe make 5 in a day, and it was a long day. Lots of glue, lots of foam parts, very slow. And at some point, I ended up getting a factory, and I had to figure out how to manufacture the shoes. And the manufacturing process is very different than the cobbling process. So I would take the shoe and I'd work down. They did the bottom. They did the bottom up. So they would have their part like this already made. And I needed to make the upper. So this is where we get into lasts. So I know, Jeff, you had brought up curved last and straight lasts.
Yep.
So this is a straight last. And you can tell it's a straight last because if you take from the heel to the toe, you see how it's straight. It comes straight through. Then there's something called a curve lasted shoe. And this is a curve lasted shoe. So when you take your ruler through here, you're not going to come up. You're not going to come through the toe. It's going to go, the toe is kind of curved in. And if I put them side by side, you can see, can you see the difference between a straight last and a curved lasted shoe? So then what you do is you have to create an upper. And I hired a really good designer who worked for Nike's Jordan brand. And so she spent a lot of time talking to the walkers about what features we needed, just how it needs to work. And again, when I cobbled shoes for 7 years for my customers, I learned what features of the upper needed to be for walking. For one is this area right here needs to be open. We can't have any overlays or any seams because this is the break point and people have bunions and you need to have room for the toes to spread. So it's really important to have that feature. Another thing she looked at was the heel height. So in a lot of running shoes, the heel is very high. And that interferes sometimes with flexion extension with for a walker. But in the case of the Reshod, it doesn't, because the whole foot tips. And so you don't get that. So one of the benefits to having the high Achilles is not to necessarily protect your Achilles, but to keep debris out of your shoe. So many times, you know, you kick shoes, you either kick your ankle or you kick debris into your shoe. So that's something we considered in that. A couple other things, I won't bore you with that, but the way it works is once you get your pattern, you have to make an upper. So this was an upper that I stitched and sewed. Can you see it? Okay. And then it's put on, it's draped over the last like this, and it's stitched down. Here is one that I made in my sewing room. So this is just fabric I bought from the fabric store. I don't have a sample room. I don't have a materials library. I went and bought these fabrics at the mill end store in my town. So then you have to figure out the lacing, what kind of throat opening do you want? So that new field that you show has what's called a burrito style opening. The burrito's on the side. So sometimes that interferes with a lot of foot shape. So I had to figure out how to make a shoe that will fit the most amount of people, because I don't have a lot of money to make multiple different lasts. So this one has a wide throat opening so that people with high insteps will fit into it. But it is on a straight last. And what that means is some people have a foot shape that's actually where their toes are kind of rolled over. And so they need a curved lasted shoe. But curved lasted shoes are usually used for racing. So you see a lot of race flats that have this rolled over. So some of the ones that you had in your picture on Facebook, Jeff, are curved lasted shoes. So once that part is done, then the factory will cinch this down. They'll cinch this down on the back end, and they put a board in here, or some sort of board, so that the shoe gets rigid. So now you've got a shoe that's glued down. Now it's looking more like a shoe. And then after that, they attach the midsole and the outsole, and that's how you have a shoe. So it's a very complicated process, and it's not something you can just call up a factory and say, hey, can you just kind of make this, and this is what I'm looking for. You have to give them all the specifications. You need to tell them what materials you want, you know, what's the construction method you're going to use, and all of that has to get done before you get samples, and then you have a process of confirming samples, and then you have to source your materials. So it's probably a 4-month process to get to the point where you're going to be able to order your shoes. And then comes the money. You have to order a large amount. And this is one of the reasons we don't see big brands making race walk shoes, is because the numbers that we need to keep factories in business is quite high. This is something that Nike people told me. They said they can't make money making race walk shoes. However, I would read periodicals in the sporting goods news that said that walking was the #1 category. #1, always. It's always the #1 category. So how can this be that the #1 category is walking and we don't have walking shoes? So what I discovered is that race walkers want something very specific. So when the marketing people go out to talk to race walkers know to a T what they want, and they all speak the same thing: low heel, flexible forefoot. We just went through all those. If you talk to fitness walkers, power walkers, the rest of the gamut, they just say comfort, but they don't define what comfort is. So it's left to the developer to figure out how to do that. So you find these very cushy shoes that are being made for the rest of the walking market. So my thought was, what if we can make a shoe that satisfies the comfort part for walkers and also is functionally correct for race walkers? Now you're able to combine this, and you no longer have a niche market. And my girlfriend did this in the medical community. So her son had osteosarcoma. And she found out there's not a lot of funding for osteosarcoma, and there's a lot of sarcomas out there. So guess what they did? They combined and they rallied together. It's like, we're the Sarcoma Foundation. Now all of a sudden they're a bigger block, and they're able to get the funding. So I just did the same thing with the race walking shoes, is to say, let's join walking, make something that works functionally for race walkers and fitness walkers and power walkers. And it's the same technology. And that's kind of the key. So I don't even have a pair of my shoes here, but Well, here's one. Here's a sample. So, yeah, this is the pushover technology. So I have two different styles, the pushover and the Coach Carmin. And the pushover style has the, well, I'll just show you this. I don't know what I did with my thing, but you see how you have this long angle here, and then you have this is stability and this is cushioning. So as your foot lands, where your heel hits, as your body shifts, this front part compresses and it pops your heel or your foot into this position. It's a lot easier to push in this position than it is to push off in this position. So you no longer need it to bend at the toe. So that's the big deal with what's different between my shoes and running shoes, is we no longer need that old paradigm. That's not to say we can't keep it, but one of the things I started this project in 1991, where I started just kind of modifying my own running shoes. And then I gravitated to going to a shoe repair, and he cut things off for me so I could actually just experiment with a lot of different configurations. So I used to just get foam parts and pieces, and I used just to cut them up and try and find different ways to make the shoe work in a rolling motion. I just wanted to feel that roll, and I didn't know what it would look like in the end, but this is kind of what I came up with these two designs. So yeah, so then I ended up finally getting a factory was about 2014, who's been making the shoes for me, and it's still a long, slow process, but I mean it's going well, and the shoes have been very well received. I'm not done. I'm still planning to do a race flat for indoors for 1,500 meters. It's just very expensive. I don't have deep pockets, so I've just been kind of going along to see how it morphs. I see Frank. I see some people here on the Zoom that have been very supportive by purchasing shoes, and I have customers that purchased shoes when I was resoling them back in 2008, 2009, who just stayed with me. Did you, Frank, get resold shoes? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to do it again.
Yeah. There are people who like the negative heeled shoes, but when I went to manufacturing, I took it to zero. So zero drop is actually what that means is under the heel and under the ball of the foot, your foot sits at the same height in those two places. But yeah, and I appreciate people like Frank who have been coming along with me along this ride, because I couldn't have done it without you trying out the different shoes and giving me the feedback. So that's great. So yeah, I have a couple other, till Jeff gets back here, I will show you some of the old shoes that I have in my archive. I have the old Nike. Let's see, this is the EXW. Anybody remember this one? Circa 1984, maybe? Anybody know that one? And then this is a Spring Boost. This is a shoe my dad sent me, and it is a European design, and it has kind of a spring feature in it too, but it's very, very, very stiff, and it's not my size, so I can't tell you how well it worked, but you can check and see if it's still out there. So does anyone have questions on either of the two styles of the shoes?
Carmin, hi, finally get to see you.
Oh, hey, John, good to see you. John's another, my long-term. Yeah.
You mentioned a indoor racing flat.
Yeah.
Would that be usable outside or not?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it would be very thin, like a race flat. So I showed you these outsoles. I have a couple of different outsoles. So again, going back to costs, here's an outsole, and I have contracted with Vibram. Vibram is an outsole maker, and you'll see them on a lot of boots. You see them, a lot of brands will have the Vibram outsole on there. For me, it was a good fit to partner with Vibram. Sometimes people pronounce it Vibram. It's either way is right. But there's only 2 or 3 of their styles that really are suited to my shoe. So if I want to improve, I have to buy molds and make my own outsole. And again, there's minimums, it's costly. it's just not something that's feasible at the moment. So I'm kind of right now using the Vibram, and they work really well, but there are limitations. The newest one is the scooter, which is on my pushover 3, and that one has to be split, and it has to grab one of those. I think I have one here. Yeah, so this is my scooter, the scooter outsole, which is on the pushover 3. The problem is they come very thick, so the factory has to actually split them down the middle, which takes time. And this only comes in certain sizes, so it doesn't come in anything below a men's 6 or over a men's 13. So you got in just under the wire there, Frank. You've got this, and this is a blown rubber. It's lighter. I really like it, but it's blown rubber, so it's easy to wear through. Whereas the others I use are 100% rubber. They last a little bit longer. And I really like this one is a black version of this outsole, which is on the Coach Carmin. And I really like the toothy tread that it has. It really acts like a claw as you're rolling forward, giving a really good traction. So yeah. So
We've got 5 people in our club, the Heartland Race Walkers, and every one of them, excuse me, every one of them really love the shoe.
good. Thank you. I appreciate the support so much.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's that?
I'm just asking, is it a big deal for a local shoemaker to replace just the Vibram outsole?
It shouldn't be.
And are they available to match
Yes.
the shoes that you have now?
I do. I don't have them online. I don't have them on my website, but yeah, I have a lot of I have a lot of this one.
Mhm.
And I have a few of these. So if you reach out to me, let me know. I can sell you these and you can take them to the shoe repair.
Unfortunately, until I make some improvements, I'm not having an even wear pattern between the left and the right.
Oh.
So when the shoes reach a certain point, I guess that the thing to do would be to replace both of them.
That may be the case, but you can also shoot me a picture. And as Jeff talked about in the past, your outsole wear is really it's a telltale sign of your functional movement. And so I'll look at outsole patterns and I can tell you how you're walking. I can tell you a lot about dysfunction, maybe some strength that you need, how you're walking. But yeah, the shoes really tell the tales, especially if you have one that's different left to right. So you probably have some rotated hips or a leg length discrepancy.
And Frank, you're not alone. Every one of us has an uneven wear pattern. I used to crush the right outside heel compared to my left. Must be from my excellent soccer days,
Right. And also walking on a track is going to cause some of that just because you're going in circles, your left and right foot's not doing the same thing.
Sure. All right. Well, we went a little out of order, Carmin. So you did a lot of the Reshod stuff that we were going to do later.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Alex, since we've done all this other stuff, let's skip your collection of shoes and go directly to your presentation, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, Alex, first of all, I have to tell you, I'm like tickled pink that you took something that I shot as just PR for race walking, which was a photo story, right? I had no intention of that piece being analytical in any way. And I'll let you say what you did with it, but I just want to say thank you because you made my day.
Sure thing.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you for taking pictures of their feet when you were doing this. Often sports photographers only look at the emotion on their face or how hard they're working, and you don't see the feet. So this is really nice to have pictures of feet so that I could figure out what their shoes were. Basically, what I did with this, and I've done it with some of your other footage as well. I just looked on Google image search and figured out based on the color patterns and pattern on the sole and whatnot what all these shoes were. And I did that partly because, you know, a lot of the shoes that people have been using have been discontinued. And so I was curious, you know, what are people using now? Because what people used to be using, you know, they don't make anymore. And so I wanted to get a new, and so last year's World Championships, you know, is a pretty good, you know, most recent, like a lot of the elite athletes are going to go through 5 or 6 pairs of shoes a year. So they're probably using the latest and greatest shoes. Unlike me, still using 5-year-old shoes.
I would correct you and say elite athletes at this level. Somebody got into it on Facebook with me about, well, if a champion walks out, I'm like, well, what champion are you talking about? Because if you're saying champion at the World Championships, that's very different than your local champion. But I would imagine they go through at least a pair a month.
Oh yeah.
If they're wearing and if they're wearing these very expensive shoes, even quicker, right? These are safe for racing, but
Yeah.
continue.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I think your estimate is probably better than mine. What I found interesting in doing this study was that most of the athletes, your selection of pictures is probably not a random sample of the athletes, right? You're taking a lot of pictures of the USA athletes. You're focused on the people at the front of the pack, right? So
this was very much a front of the pack Canadian friends and United States friends selection. Now, if you want to do a complete, you know, analysis, I can send you video and you can peck it apart across the depth. But these are the best people in the world and the best people in North America, right?
Yeah, and this is I think this is a sufficiently broad study. You can see basically everybody's using a different shoe. So there wasn't one. But what I thought was interesting was most of them are using these modern, very springy shoes with the carbon or sometimes some sort of plastic insert in the middle, which gives the shoe stiffness and improves the energy return, which is really designed for running. Right, when a runner hits the ground, that energy is stored in the shoe and then rebounded, and that could be a bad thing for race walking. You could end up losing contact with the ground because the shoes are bouncing. And so it was interesting that people are using these. I have a shoe that I've been using occasionally that has a similar thickness to it, but it doesn't have the carbon plate in it. And I have a really hard time walking in these because it's so soft that I end up working my hips really hard and my shins really hard to sort of fight that softness. But it appears that the elite athletes, I guess they have stronger shins than I do, and that works for them, whereas it doesn't work for somebody weak like me. And so
Alex, I should have said this at the beginning, but it's fair to say that shoe selection is a very personal choice. And so what works for Mike, what works for me may not work for you and vice versa. And we all have individual challenges that we have to deal with. I can't walk in any shoes without putting some form of orthotic or corrective piece in it because my normal gait is a disaster. Although if you looked at me as a race walker, you'd say, wow, that looks smooth. But the biomechanics of what's going on, you know, internally is not ideal. The other thing to note is, I think you had this discussion with me in private about whether or not they're going to have an excessive loss of contact because of the springiness. And what I will tell you is Evan Dunphy, who's in the middle there, did not have any excessive loss of contact. He was really ideal when I did unpublished measurements. Others, shall we just say, were very high flyers. So you might need to alter your technique. You might need, as you say, superhuman strength that makes them world-class race walkers that you and I don't even come close to sniffing, right?
Yeah, there's an interesting detail in my study of these super shoes. There seem to be two basic families of the super shoes. There's the ones that are designed for a lot of return of energy from the heel, and there's some that are designed for return of energy from the toe. And it looks like most of the shoes that the race walkers are using are the latter, where the heel is soft, but it's not so springy. And the spring is mostly in the toe. That was something that Katie Burnett mentioned in her recommendation of, there's a shoe that she likes that has only a carbon plate in the front half, and it's just foam in the back. And those work for her nicely. Most of the shoes in these pictures on this slide have a full length carbon plate, but the carbon plate is sort of tilted forwards. So you're biasing the stride towards the toe, which is biomechanically, I think, very similar to what Carmin's shoes do, where you're helping the athlete roll towards the toe. So I think they're not just using any old super shoe. They're using that specific family of super shoes for the most part. I personally haven't tried them yet. I'm interested to hear if anybody else has tried these sort of super shoes yet, but
I believe Evan Dunphy's comment was, and if I'm misquoting you, Evan, I apologize, but my recollection was that you liked them, but you didn't because they wore out so quickly. That, you know, these are not long-lasting shoes, so you're not going to train in. Sorry, my dog is barking. That's why I keep disappearing. But you're not going to use these shoes for training every day. They're going to be for elite competitions and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Another thing we need to think about too is injuries, and we see a lot of laminectomies, a lot of high hamstring injuries, and I'm kind of curious if the soft heel is creating that. And the reason I think that is because if you have a soft heel and your body's sinking down and going vertical, you have to somehow change that direction into a forward direction. You're taking a horizontal or a vertical motion, trying to redirect it forward. What are you doing with your body to make that happen? I don't want to get too complicated, but I think about the hamstring is attached to your knee joint and your hip joint. Hip joint moves, rotates, the knee is stable. So if you're rotating and you're going vertically, it's kind of like a rubber band that you're stretching over and over. Is that causing a potential injury? And I do see a lot of that in the race walk world, the high hamstring injuries and also the laminectomy. So
Carmin, let me pause you, because as a professor, I always, if I use a big word, I try to define it, and I'll be the first to be honest. I have no idea what a laminectomy is. So can you clarify that for us?
Well, that's the spine. When people get compressions in the spine and they get them fused.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think. Did Jefferson Perez? There's a couple of athletes, some key athletes that look really good when they race walk, and I just wonder how much damage they're doing to their bodies to make themselves look good and be so smooth. And he's probably the smoothest race walker I ever seen.
And that's why we call him El Presidente. He is.
Yeah. I used to get awards a long time ago, maybe before many of you were race walking. They used to give awards for style. Did any of you remember those?
I remember those.
Yeah.
Coney Island, best style walker.
Yeah, and I remember getting those and being in so much pain, having IT band issues and all sorts of stuff. But I could make myself look good, but I was forcing myself into a position that was hurting me. And I just have to say that is a component of the shoes, is, you know, thinking about the soft heel, how that is maybe creating injuries long term, and only because it's creating that vertical motion that has to be transferred into horizontal. And that is what Katie was saying about the shoes with the plates in the front. If that is tilting you and moving you into a forward position, that's kind of what you want to happen. And that is what I did. I had the low budget version of that with my angles of the foam, is to actually create that without the plate.
So let me just say, many of you may have seen my Seinfeld race walking impersonation. I will now flip to Billy Crystal and go, darling, it's better to look good than feel good, darling. That's what I always say. And you look marvelous.
There you go.
Alex, I'm going to flip to the next one because I assume everybody's read this.
Yeah, please do. On the next slide, I found a picture of Nick with, mid stride with all of his weight on the heel there, and you can see how soft that heel is. He's probably compressing an inch. That heel gets an inch shorter when he lands on it. It's compared to any of the shoes that I've raced in, those are really soft. It works for Nick, but
again, it works for Nick in a race situation. I don't believe he's training in these.
Yeah,
right. Which is, and Carmin, I'll just do a plug for your shoes. I haven't worn them enough to give you a mileage, but I would say anecdotally, your shoes will last much longer in training than the racing flats like the New Feel. So while they may be more expensive, in the long run, they're not. And that's how I always felt about the Hershey's, that, I'm paying a lot of money, but I can get them resold. I can do this. They last longer naturally. And that's all kind of taken into account holistically of my kind of shoe budget. So just things to think about.
And I get people who complain that the heel is too hard, and they don't understand that I created a shoe for a soft heel landing and rolling over onto the toe. So if you're expecting to be able to do kind of a straight-legged run technique where you're bouncing off your heel and then popping off the toe and expecting it to bounce off the toe too, you're going to be disappointed in the Reshods. They're not designed for that.
And again, it comes down to, how every individual handles it, right? I always struck very hard and as a collegiate walker, and I walk about a 132 back when the rules were, you had to have real contact. And I was having problems. I had knee surgery. I wasn't recovering from knee surgery. And there was a PhD at the Foot and Ankle Institute who was a junior national race walking champ, Howard Paul Marchuk. So he hooked me up with their gait lab. And if I just pedestrian walked over the pressure plates, which in 1989 were cutting edge technology, I struck the ground 30% harder than the average person for my weight. So it wasn't shocking that I developed injuries, right? So my shoe selection and my choices had to take into account that my natural gait, although it looks smooth in race walking, I was striking much harder than it looked. So, no one size fits all, but that's why we get different opinions and different shoes. Alex, I'm going to move forward again.
Yeah, please.
Can I just say, these photos look marvelous, darling. Yeah. I don't know where you could have gotten them.
Those are great photos. Yeah, basically the same story with the women. What's her name that came in second in this race is wearing some super shoes, and as is Maria. Interestingly, the women seem to have, as a general rule, cheaper shoes than the men. They didn't all have the super fancy $300 super shoes. Maybe they just aren't as well funded, or maybe they for whatever reason.
They don't weigh as much. Women are lighter.
Yeah.
And they don't
that could be part of it.
Yeah, that is the factor.
Yeah. I thought it was the woman who won this race. She was wearing some shoes that are a couple years old. And curiously, they have a bit of a gap between the heel and the toe, so when you roll forward on those shoes, it doesn't roll as smoothly. Personally, I like a shoe that doesn't have a gap in the middle, so it rolls all the way across. But she won the 35K with a shoe that has a gap in the middle. So that isn't necessarily a deal breaker for everybody. I thought that was interesting.
I'm gonna move on to the results of the study that I did. So this is a non-scientific, just reach out to everyone on Facebook and say, what are you wearing? And we had 16% of the people respond with Reshod, which is not surprising because they are one of the only race walk specific shoes out there. I think the New Feel number would be larger if they actually got their manufacturing and distribution in check. The A6 Hyperspeed and the Magic are probably the most similar to the shoes that I showed earlier, which when I walked in were called the Asics Tiger Paw. So it seems like that hasn't changed. And then Saucony, you know, which surprised me because Saucony wasn't a brand that a lot of race walkers used when I was competitive, but they've sort of migrated. I tried to get a pair from my friend's daughter works for them, and I put them on, and they were not race walkable. But those are at least some shoes that the general populace is wearing. This was predominantly a non-elite survey. All right, this was because I also asked what level of walker are you, and some competed at a national level, very few. Mike might have been one of the only ones who responded as an international competitor. And I'm going to use that as a segue to let Mike talk a little bit about his story.
Jeff, do you mind if I
go
jump
ahead
in for a second? Maybe not in your survey, but in a lot of the athletes that I coach use cross-country racing spikes. They take the spikes out, and they like those. I have a pair that I've been trying. They work okay for me on the track, but they don't bend in the right place because of the spike plate. So I tend to recommend against this because because of the stiff toe from the spikes. But I have seen a lot of youth athletes using this type of shoe, and yeah. So
sounds
add
good
that to the survey. But
all right, Mike, where are you hiding? Why don't I see you?
I'm here.
Ah, there you are.
There he is.
Very good. All right. So give us your background in terms of not athletically, because we know you're the Italian stallion of race walking, and you have competed internationally and on many national teams and won a couple of national titles. But in terms of shoes, how did you end up landing on Reshod as your shoe of choice? What did you start in? Where did you go in between? And then why do you feel Reshod worked well for you? And if you have any insight into why you wear them versus, you know, Maria and some of the others picking other ones, why you think you like them better, that'd be great.
Thanks, Jeff. I think I won hide and seek champion for today for the call as well, but all humor aside, it's an honor to be on the show. I think it's been awesome to see Carmin get to talk about her roots, and I just really, a lot of it I knew, but a lot of it, as long as I've known Carmin, I learned a lot today of her story and her path. So this is still very educational, even for myself, who's been involved. I used to traditionally start wearing like Adidas racing flats, transition to the Adios about 2012 when that was the premier shoe. I've worn the Boost off the Adios Boost off and on, and then transitioned into more of the Mizuno Hitagami. That worked well for me until I had an injury in about 2017. Then I was really particular because certain shoes just weren't working for me the same coming back. I was not as fit. I had some weight gain. So I was already on top of trying to recover from an injury and not have it reoccur. And so the timing lined up that I had gotten to try her shoes at just a prototype of them right before the 2016 Olympic trial race. I think, Carmin, you remember when you had the clinic? So that's where I had a sample of trying them. And I told her, if you get a product, I'd try it. Well, the timing, so as you know, Carmin, she remembers, I'm sure, I called her. I was ready to buy a pair, and I was able to race. I was apprehensive. The first time I put them on, I was like, I don't know. I'm still not quite sure how I feel about these. But then I gave them a second workout, and I was like, you know what? I'm starting to kind of feel more of a flow and more synchronized. They were a different approach than the other shoes I had worn, predominantly racing flats from name brands. And then these had a couple of things that were different right off the start. It forced me, I felt at the time, to engage my core a bit more, which was good. I definitely noticed that like the tread on the bottom is more ideal for when I'm training, and it gets, especially when I was in Ohio and Canada, it gets more rainy and some snow. If it was even light snow, use discretion, but I was able to go out a little bit and do optimally well. The tread on the bottom was pretty good on the Reshod pushovers. So that was a couple of things that initially caught me early on. But then I found that her the red shoes were ideal for me to train in. Again, they had a longer lasting life than the other shoes I'd purchased prior. Even though you put up a little money up front, it saves you from buying more shoes. And I noticed that was an advantage. And again, just that outsole, the tread would last longer, which was advantageous. The other thing I liked about the red and the blue is the toe box. It had enough room for as your foot swells as the workout goes on. I've done up to 50K in these shoes, both pair really. And that was one thing that I thought was advantageous, was I didn't have to worry about my toes being cramped up in there in that toe box. So that was something I appreciated.
Let me add a comment on that. I think that's a really important piece that people overlook. I've never gotten a black toenail from race walking, right? And I've walked tons of miles. I did get one once from hiking because I didn't know you had to buy your boots a half size big, and I went down the Grand Canyon and destroyed my toenails, right? If there's anything that you want to think about in a shoe, having that toe box be proper is really important. So the fact that you highlighted that, I think, is great. And I'm gonna go get the dog again, so I'll let you keep talking.
No problem. No, thanks, Jeff. The transition to the blue shoes. So I initially, of course, tried with the red, but when she released the blue, which I remember being extremely eager to try in 2018, I first wore it at the 2018 Nationals. It felt a bit lighter, a bit more responsive, and the tread, it was different before. It used to have the same tread as the red, but I like both. I mean, this one with the tread she has on this one, the blue Coach Carmin, I felt that this one has been more ideal for speed workouts in racing. Those two with this shoe have gone pretty well. I don't know if it's more psychological because the weight between them is not vast, but for whatever reason, the construction of the shoe is seems to be more ideal for speed workouts, racing. And so I've used that from 2018 up through, I was in Oman in so I qualified for Oman a year ago this month, and in these, and then wore them in Oman at the World Team Race Walking Champs this past year. So the tread on these are pretty more durable so I've worn other shoes as well. For example, even like the Puma, the tread will last much longer on the blue than even other typical racing shoes. And I also like the colors, as far as like red and blue. It's kind of patriotic, maybe coincidental, but I like that aspect. And I also, in the core of it all, I like that Carmin is someone who's from the race walk community that's trying to provide something for the race walk community, and supporting a small business has been a big, I would say, something that you feel is just kind of supporting your community. And with regard to the shoes, I probably have gotten, if I rotate my shoes, but I will get at least 2 months out of these, out of the red for training. Minimum.
Can you quantify what 2 months means in terms of miles?
Very, very. Thank you, Jeff. So for me, I would average, when I'm perfectly healthy, about 60 miles a week. So that's about 420 a month that I'd get out of the red. So I'd get at least a month. If I'm doing
60 a week is 240 a month, 480 total.
That's about pretty close to what I'd be getting out of these before I have to start, rotating in a fresh pair. I would get slightly
I
less.
just want to introduce the Meshuggah, the number one race walker back there, Miss Munson, who's looking up. She interrupts all my college lectures and race walking lectures.
No, that's awesome. Munson's she gets a free pass. She's a different status. And then to be honest, despite that I currently test other brands, I'm still a Reshod affiliate, and I love to help offer feedback, so that can maybe help offer any feedback that would improve the shoe for elites. That's really where I kind of come into play with Reshod, and I'm always I guess you could say I'm always an eager guinea pig to try anything new that Carmin's putting out or that she's trying to lean into. But I'm also patient because I know that it's very difficult as a small business. She's not like Nike where she can just put out all these prototypes in no time. So I work with I try to work with it and understand that, you know, that things don't happen overnight when you're a small business the way they do with a major corporation. So I have a lot of respect for her persistence and her fortitude to continue to persist in this uphill battle. And I just love that her heart's in it for our community. So thank you, Carmin.
Thank you, Mike. And I'll just add to that. Yeah, Mike is experimenting with some plated. It's something that I have experimented with in my shoes. I haven't talked about it, but I have samples. This one here actually has a plate in it. So I have been experimenting with plated shoes. I'd like to get Mike's feedback because he has experience with the Reshods. He knows how they roll. So he's a good conduit. He's a good person to give me feedback. He's a good guinea pig. That's right.
That's probably
yeah,
politically incorrect to say now.
Yeah, you might see Mike in different non-reshods this next weekend, and that's all planned. It's not. Don't read anything into that. He's very loyal, and I appreciate Mike too. And he is a customer before he was a sponsored athlete and ambassador, and that is one of the things I look for when I pull in ambassadors for my brand. Is I want people who are customers that like the product. I get plenty of people contacting me to be a guinea pig, and but they don't wear my brand. So when you look at Mike, he hasn't been thrown a bunch of free shoes. He's done a lot of heavy lifting for Reshod, and I really appreciate him too. So thank you, Mike.
I look forward to continuing to work forward.
Let's roll to questions. I just want to say we had 16 people on the Zoom. All 16 are here an hour later. So I take that as a testament that you guys are all as big race walking nerds as we are. But now it's your time to shine. So any questions at all to any of us for opinions, please?
So I do have a question. So I just want to know, it was kind of mentioned when talking about the elite ladies. So what about for larger people? Us, say, Athena athletes. Are there any recommendations in terms, like right now, I'm over 200 pounds.
Okay.
So shoes have been a little harder. You know, I'm taking it off and I'll get back down, but just
let me start so that Carmin doesn't make it sound like a commercial and I'll be a commercial for Carmin. The shoes that the elites are wearing are absolutely, and I've never put them on, but I'm going to say they're absolutely wrong for someone who is heavier. I also think almost all of the race walking shoes from my study are wrong because they're going to be very light race walking flats. And, you know, it's great if you wear them and they're going to last 100 miles and they're going to be trashed, right? And maybe less than that. I would say as a 6'2" guy, I'm 180 pounds. I'm on the light side of a tall person. But I would gravitate to a shoe like Carmin's because I think it's got support, but it has support also in the right places. And I don't know of any other popular shoe. And Carmin, before you talk, I'm going to let Alex chime in since he kind of is the guru of what everybody's wearing. But I don't know of anything else. You know, if this were pre-Carmin, I would have said wear the Hershey's for the exact same reasons. Hershey's not really an option, and I think Carmin's are better at this point. So, Alex?
Yeah, sure. I agree. A shoe with support, especially support in the middle. It needs to be unlike. You don't want it to do this like these spikes, right? You don't want it to bend in the middle. Something that's stiff in the middle, I think, is very important. There are very few racing flats that are, that have that structure. So you might need to look for something that's a little bit heavier, not so much a racing shoe, but more of a training shoe.
All right, Alex, I'm going to interject here and say that the question was, what shoe? Right? Like we can talk generalities, but you are the shoe master, the grand poobah of shoe knowledge. Can you recommend a brand other than Carmin's? Because we'll get to Carmin's, but Is there anything else out there as a generic thing from your long spreadsheet that you think might work?
Yeah, I have not personally tried them, but I know some masters athletes that are on the heavier side, like the Ultra, ALTRA. They're 0 drop, similar to Carmin. They have good support, a nice wide toe box, similar to Carmin's shoes. They don't have the nice toe push that Carmin's shoes do, but maybe they're good in other ways. The Saucony Fast Twitch is one, maybe the only racing flat that has good midfoot support. So if you're looking for a racing shoe, that one is maybe something to consider. But maybe it's not enough support. Yeah, so I guess Ultra and Reshod would be the ones that I would point to start your search.
Okay,
Yeah.
Carmin, you want to say which of your shoes would be the best in this situation?
Yeah, thanks. I would say the pushover, any of the pushover styles would work best for you, unless you have super wide feet, and then I'd go to an Ultra. Yeah, the shoes are made on a men's D width last. So they usually fit all women. If you have a triple E, you're not going to fit. And unfortunately, I get customers with triple E's, and I do recommend Ultra in that situation. But yeah, if you I'm not going to ask your size over Zoom, but you can contact me. I have still a good selection of the red, the original style, which is my favorite shoe. That's what I'll be racing in next weekend. And I'm not heavy, but I really like that shoe, and I can get a lot of good reviews on that one. So that's what I would recommend. If that one doesn't, if I don't have your size, I'd check the new black styles in any of the pushovers. But yeah, you can contact me, you can call me or email me, and I'm happy to talk to you by phone, which is another thing. I'm available by phone, and people call me. Frank, you can call me. John calls me. John and I have a lot of conversations by phone. So I'm available by phone. So call me, get my opinion. Well, I can help you with your sizing and what your foot issues are. If you have bunions or you have high arches or wide feet, I can really steer you to the right shoe.
Yeah, I've got crazy feet. I think I will be calling you.
Yeah,
This is
do.
awesome.
And
Yeah,
that's,
thanks.
Carmen's really great at that. And, just so everybody knows, I'm friends with Carmin, but I'm friends with her because we've sort of established this professional friendship when you started coming out with shoes, right? It's not like we race together or, I'm doing this a favor. This is one professional respecting another professional.
Thank you.
That said, we have a question, and the question is, what about the width of shoes? I'll give my 2 cents, which a lot of shoes don't come in variable widths. My understanding is New Balance probably are one of the few that do come in various widths. And I don't know if it's still Stretcho. These are the 1400s. I think it's a 1500 now. So you could look and see, what widths they have. Alex, what do you know?
The 1500 has also been discontinued. They don't make any, New Balance no longer makes any racing flats. The one, they do have one with a carbon plate that's relatively low heel for the carbon plate shoes that comes in widths. That one might be worth considering. That's one that David Swartz races in. I forgot the name of it. It's on the spreadsheet. I could pull it up. But yeah, Saucony also has some widths, but unfortunately, a lot of the Saucony shoes, they only make widths in their training shoes, not in their racing shoes. So if you need a wide shoe, you might be stuck with a training shoe. That's a weird quirk in the industry.
It probably has to do with volume,
Yeah.
Carmin, anything to add?
It's true. Yeah, and I'll tell you one part of my background. I worked for Columbia Sportswear's footwear development team. So I was fit and wear test coordinator, and I learned a lot about fit and wear and foot shapes and uppers when I worked in that department. I sat in on product creation meetings, and I can tell you that walking is never talked about when developing a shoe. So we talk about running and the different nuances of runners and the gait and all that, but they love to sell their running shoes to walkers, but it's nothing about walking is ever a part of that conversation. As far as my background was, no, it's just not a consideration. People kind of have this idea that walking is a slower version of running. And so it really doesn't matter. If you can make it for the runners, it'll work for the walkers. And I don't agree with that. And I was actually pretty offended when I was a young athlete looking for shoes, going into a retail store and say, hey, I'm a race walker, what you got? And he says, well, we'll just wear these running flats because you're kind of fast. And it's, I wanted something designed for us. And that's my heart. That's what I want to do. And I like to see it happen. I've been trying to figure out the best way to go. And so I'm always interested. You have feedback on the shoes, send them my way. But did you have questions on width? Did you want me to say something else on that, Jeff, about the width?
Well, the question was, what do you do if you have a wider foot? So is there multiple widths in your shoes, or are they all one width?
Not yet. It's something I want to do. It's, again, I don't have deep pockets, so
Right.
it's easy to do. If I were customizing the shoes, it's no problem, because I would make the shoe as wide. I would just cut the piece of foam as wide as your shoe. So if it needed to be 5 inches, I'd make it 5 inches. Most people needed 4.5. But yeah, that was no problem. And I can't customize shoes anymore. Like I said, it was a 5-hour per shoe process, and I just don't have that. And I don't have the people to do the work for me. So
Sure.
At some point I'll make a last. You have to start with the last, and I have to make one that's a little bit wider. But again, that's a money problem, and I have to figure out which, when I can afford to do that. But it's something I want to do. It's like I said, it comes down to the funding.
Absolutely. Any other questions from the fans out there?
Carmin, have you tried to develop a relationship with some of the retail stores, even local ones or Fleet Feet, something like that?
Yeah, I have. It's tough right now. There's a lot of excess inventory. As you know, the pandemic has changed so many different things, and it's changed the way businesses, brick and mortars, do their business. We were online very much for a while. Now we're back to in-store sales. But right now people have excess inventory that they're trying to get rid of. So you have to remember too that I'm competing with all the running shoes. So if I go to a retailer and say, hey, I've got this great walking shoe, they already have established relationships with athletic brands that want them to sell their running shoes to walkers. So they're not going to want to give up floor space for me, and then there's an extra SKU that they're going to have to do inventory for. I'm not a well-known brand, so it's very difficult to get in and say, hey, here I am, I'm the answer to your walking shoes, and they may not agree with that. So I've stuck with my online sales, and it's gone well. So unfortunately, that's where I'm at. I do shows, but that's the only in-person that I do where people can actually come try on shoes. I sell to my athletes at the track too. So people fly into town, they'll take coaching from me, they'll buy shoes, but that's kind of where it's been.
Do you also sometimes offer people to try them on at races, like if you're going to be in Santee?
Yeah, I had a booth at the Active Lifestyle show for many years. I won't this year. I don't even know if they're having it, but yeah, absolutely.
They're not. Tracy confirmed they won't be.
Okay, thanks.
All right, we have another question. And Carmin, I'm going to let you give the official answer, and then I'll let Mike give his experience. The question is, with Reshod, would you have a pair for training and a lighter pair for racing? I feel that was always my MO, that I wore the shoes that had more stability, comfort, and support for training, and then I put lighter shoes on. And the one piece of advice that I would give is, if you are going to do that, you don't switch the day of the race. You do 1 or 2 lighter speed workouts during the week before in the lighter shoes, so that your body gets adjusted to it, so your shins don't suddenly start to hurt.
Yeah.
But Carmin?
So yeah, the official answer is maybe. I know that's not what you wanted to hear. The Reshod, the red pushovers, are about 10 ounces for my weight, for my size. So I'm an 8, men's 8, and they're about 10 ounces. The new pushover 3 is actually about an ounce or so lighter. So you could have trained in the red pushovers and then switch to the pushover 3s and have a lighter shoe for race day. So that one has a blown rubber outsole. It's lighter. You're going to wear through it much quicker. So you could do that and save it for, I think, Mike, are you pulling that up? Do you have one of those handy there? The
Wouldn't be
pushover
this
3.
one.
Yeah. Turn to show them the underside. So that's got the other outsole on it. So it wears through quickly, but it's the exact same shoe as the red pushover. So you could do that and you're still basically wearing the same shoe. The other thing is I do rotate from the red to the blue. And the differences between the two shoes is that the red shoe has long levers. So you can see how the angles on here are long. So long levers are for power, short levers are for speed. So the blue Coach Carmin, kind of hard to see, but in here, I have the firm sole, the firm midsole only goes from here to here. And then from here to here is softer. And this is really soft. So I kind of showed it to you with the with this piece here. So you can see there's three pieces. This is hard, this is softer, and this is really a soft piece. So shorter levers are for speed. Longer levers for power, shorter levers are for speed. So that's why this shoe, which is what this is, really works well for people who are trying to get quick turnover, because this shoe really encourages that fast turnover. That being said, I have a hard time keeping up with these shoes for distances over 35K. So you're going to see me in the red shoes for the 35K. I'll race in these for short distances under 20K, and I use them for track practice, but then I switch back to the red pushovers for my distance races. So it really, it just depends on your physical technique and how it works with your body. I notice that when I wear these shoes, I get more core activation, and when I wear the red pushovers, I get more glute activation. So so that's why I say maybe. You just have to experiment around and decide. Mike loves those blue Coach Carmins for the 50K. He's worn these for, I mean, how many hours are you out for a 50K, Mike?
Thankfully, I got under 5 before they switched it. I had to, well, after my comeback, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I managed to get under 5 in the blues, and but even faster in the 35K results for the blues.
Okay. Yeah.
So Mike, do you actively think about the weight of one shoe versus the other when you're deciding to race?
I do, but like you alluded to earlier, I always experiment with them. I experiment with them and through my training in heat, if possible, or the rain. If so, I want to know if these shoes get wet, not even necessarily from rain, but like aid stations. When you race walk through aid stations, you're going to get sloshy a little bit from other drinks spilled and whatnot. You might spill your own on your feet a little bit, or pouring water on yourself. I want to know how they respond. Do they stay sloshy? Does it evaporate? This is any shoe. I'm always experimenting, because those little things, the less you have to leave the chance the day of the race, the better off.
Great.
This upper has some multiple layers built in, so you can get it a little wet and your feet are going to stay relatively dry. It's not the same if you walk through puddles or if you're in a downpour for 4 hours, but these shoes do keep my feet pretty dry, and customers have told me the same. Do you notice that too, Mike, that your feet will stay relatively dry in these?
Yes, like you said, as long as it's not like a downpour, they do pretty well, and the tread does pretty well, even in wet conditions versus a lot of other. Like for example, I love the Puma shoes, but your tread, I'm more smooth cutting through the asphalt on even a light rain.
But not the pushover 3s. That one's not designed for really slick. So if you're going to be rainy, I wouldn't wear those on a rainy day. Are you going to wear? Yeah, I'm not going to ask you that question.
It's going to rain in Santee.
Yeah, it's going to rain in Santee. Yeah, I'm going to wear these because the red. This is what you'll see me in next weekend because of the same. I want that extra tread, and the shoes just perform really well. You got to stick with what works.
Sounds good. Okay, I got a 2-part question from Lynn. And this is directed to you, Carmin. So someone's coming out of kind of regular shoes and they're going to switch to, Reshod. And obviously it's a different biomechanics for their walking. And, so I always say, when you make changes, like at the end of a clinic, you learn this great new technique. Well, you can't go race walk out with the new technique, and do 20 miles the day after your first clinic, because your body's not going to adapt to it. So what should somebody like have as a transition plan? What should they expect to feel as they go from normal shoes to, we'll call them the advanced Reshod shoes? From like a schedule, like should they do it every other day? And then what will they experience physically?
Well, I always tell people don't try anything new before a race. And that really it's for any shoe, whether it's Reshod or any shoe. But I have had customers that violate that rule and they've come back. It's like, I wore them out of the box and they were great. I loved them. But I don't know, were they super sore the next day? But people have done it. I would say that it really depends on the person's body. If you're tight, if you have foot issues, be careful and switch, maybe swap shoes every other day, maybe gradually work them into your routine. If you wear orthotics, that's going to affect it too. If you've been wearing a very high heel and you're switching into the Reshods, you might want to put maybe a different insole in there to kind of raise the heel a little bit. But you could also just wear them around the house for a little bit till your body gets used to it and stretch. And but I have not had an issue with people telling me that they're really having trouble adapting to the shoes. But yeah, it's something that you should think about.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Any considerations for people who wear orthotics with your shoes?
The shoes are built with a deep toe box, so it's made to accommodate the orthotics. So this see, there's paper in here, but the insole comes out, it's removable, and you can slide your insole in there. Your orthotic, you don't need to go up a size to accommodate the orthotics. Customers have told me that they fit in there just fine. So,
so I'm not wearing my custom orthotics because I think they accidentally might have been sent to Goodwill with old shoes. But I have this semi-custom orthotic that you bake in the oven and then stand in. And this was not staged or planned. They're in my Reshods. So
that they were designed with that in mind. Actually, the last I use is this isn't the last I used, but the last I have is flat, so that it is designed so that you're putting whatever you have for your orthotic isn't screwed up by having some contoured bottom in the shoe. So it's worked really well. I have a lot of customers with orthotics, a lot of customers with plantar plate tears, bunions that need a fixed rocker. A lot of podiatrists send me customers with those kind of issues for this specific shoe because they don't want the foot to flex at the toe. So this helps assist to roll. So yeah, that's a big chunk of my customers.
Great. All right, well, I'm going to wrap up because we're almost at 90 minutes and I don't want to scare people with the length of this video, but we actually gained someone mid stride, so we didn't lose a single person. I want to thank Carmin, Alex, and Mike for coming and spending this Sunday, right? No, Saturday afternoon with us. I hope this is the start of many of these kind of talks, and I'll cycle in different people. And Carmin, I'm going to just plan that every January we do, and Alex, you update your survey. Carmin will get you with whatever your latest developments are, and we'll make this kind of an annual talk of what's the state of shoes, because that has to be the number one thing that people obsess over. And now with YouTube and all this kind of stuff, we can also start broadcasting it and popping it out there. So hopefully the goal for all of us is that we take our little niche sport, and Carmin, like, you remember the late 80s, that had to be the highlight of participation. I'm not saying we were better than the walkers today, but like, I walked 46 minutes in a 10K in a local 10K, and I was 6th place. Right. And that would be 6th at a 10K nationals today. Right. So we just had crazy depth back then comparatively. And we hoped it would grow, and it just has shrunk with it being removed from the New York high school program and things like that. So hopefully we can, turn this around. I'm just kind of going all into the YouTube thing. If any of you have not subscribed to my channel, I'm going to be that guy and say, please subscribe to, at Racewalk on YouTube. I'm going to try to keep popping videos out. I've put almost 200 videos out in 2 months.
Wow.
Because I've had an archive. So, so Sierra has one last quick question. I have a square foot and find the need to buy a half size larger to accommodate foot movement. How does the Reshod fit with the toe room? And she said she's in New Zealand, so it's super hard to find shoes.
She can contact me. I usually have people trace their foot, send me the measurements, and they'll compare it to the insole of my shoe. It's not a problem. So
Excellent.
we'll see how that works.
Great. Well, thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.